Right now on Morning News Now, bitter cold. Millions of Americans are feeling the brunt of this latest blast of winter. Freezing temperatures and snow making for a messy commute. We'll let you know what you can expect today and when relief is on the way. We will check in with meteorologist Angie Lassman. War of words. President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's feud continues to escalate. This comes as the U.S. envoy to Ukraine is set to meet with Zelenskyy today in Kyiv amid talks between the U.S. and Russia. The latest on the escalating tensions as the conflict between Russia and Ukraine approaches 3 years. On the chopping block, the Trump administration continues to alter the landscape of the federal government and downsize the workforce. We'll tell you who the White House and Elon Musk are targeting next. Meanwhile, a key vote is expected today for one of President Trump's most controversial picks, the latest ahead. And for the love of the game, a mother and son joining forces on and off the court. We'll introduce you to a family whose love of basketball has them on a championship journey.
I love this story so much. She's coached all of her kids, but this one is especially special.
Really cool.
Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for being with us. We're going to begin this hour with the Arctic outbreak that's freezing most of the U.S. today. Tens of millions of Americans are under cold alerts from the Rocky Mountains down to the Gulf Coast. Temperatures in some states are expected to be, get this, more than 40 degrees below average, with possible sub-zero wind chills as far south as Arkansas and Texas.
The National Weather Service predicts for Virginia, this could be a top 10 snow event. Folks there still under a state of emergency from last week when some areas were devastated by severe flooding. Today, the governor warning people to stay off the roads. Meteorologist Angie Lassman is standing by with the forecast, but we start with NBC News reporter Gary Grumbach, who is live in Virginia Beach. Less beachy, more snowy going on there, Gary. Not a part of the country that historically gets a lot of snow, yet forecasters predicted up to 12 inches could fall where you are overnight. Talk about the conditions there.
Hey, good morning, guys. Yeah, we're on the Virginia Beach boardwalk. It is not a beach day, but it is indeed a snow day. As you mentioned, the snow itself has stopped falling overnight, but that's not before 10.2 inches of snow fell at Norfolk International Airport, making it the #8 snowiest day ever in Norfolk, Virginia, in the Hampton Roads area. So the snow is out of here, but the cold and the wind is what remains. And this snow is some light, fluffy stuff here. So what that means is that the roads are going to be continued to be covered with snow even after those crews get through it with plows, guys.
Gary, Virginia's governor said that state police officers and even the National Guard had been deployed to parts of the state that were still recovering from devastating floods last week and then hit with this storm. What is the biggest concern for officials right now?
Yeah, this is a 1-2 punch for Virginia, and emergency officials are all hands on deck here. We're talking about a 40% increase in emergency vehicles here in the Hampton Roads area, making sure that folks can get to where they need to be if they need to be there. But they're saying, hey, don't get on the roads. Overnight, Virginia State Police, I just spoke to them, they tell me they saw 200 crashes in the Hampton Roads area alone. That led to 10 injuries. So folks are just saying, stay off the road. Officials want you to stay off the road for today. Schools are out of school today, but they're not out of class because of the way technology works these days. The folks here in Norfolk and Virginia Beach all have virtual learning today. So the snowball fights will have to wait, guys.
Yeah, and the snow days of my childhood have been redefined. We didn't have virtual learning back then. All right, we've talked a lot, Gary, about the recent federal agency budget cuts, the freezes. Are those having any sort of impact on just how the U.S. government is able to help with these storms?
Well, this is going to be one of the first real tests, right? Governor Youngkin said this week that he's spoken to FEMA, he's spoken to the Department of Homeland Security, and he even spoke to the White House themselves. And he says the emergency money that they're going to need to clean all this up, and especially for that flooding in southwestern Virginia, he says they're going to get the money they need when they need it. I think time will tell as it relates to that, guys.
All right, Gary Grumbach, we're going to let you try and get inside because it sounds windy there right now. Try and stay warm. Appreciate your reporting.
Well, let's bring in meteorologist Angie Lassman for a look at how winter temperatures. Frigid and snowy weather is impacting so much of the country.
Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, good morning, guys. We've got some improvement with the winter alerts as compared to yesterday. You heard Gary mention that system is on the way out. We're going to see the snow wind down through the day today. We're not completely done with it just yet, hence why we still have some of these 36 million people under winter alerts at this time. But look what happens. We're going to see some of this kind of lake effect snow ramping up. We'll see some folks like places in Roanoke and Virginia Beach get another kind of quick batch of some of the snow. But the heaviest of it and that main system we are tracking is offshore, and that's going to continue to move away. Now, one thing that'll be left are the cold winds, and that's why we're going to deal with the lake effect snow across mainly portions of the Great Lakes. The highest totals are going to be downwind of those lakes here through the day today. As we look at the big picture, though, when it comes to cold, Gary mentioned it as well. The cold is not going anywhere anytime soon. We're going to still see nearly 100 million people this morning under these cold weather alerts. You can see they extend from top to bottom of the country and even out towards the East Coast. We've got a lot of folks dealing with really dangerously cold temperatures, specifically the farther north you are into parts of the plains and the Midwest. These are your temperatures right now. So 3 degrees for the actual temperature in Minneapolis, but who cares about that when we have wind to talk about? The wind chill -6. We've got 33 below across parts of the northern plains. Kansas City, nearly 20 degrees below for what it feels like. And even places like Dallas, 13 degrees for your actual temperature, but you are feeling like 4 degrees below zero. So bundling up is the only option today. You're going to need all those extra layers if you have to get out the door. And temperatures, even this afternoon, they don't look a whole lot better depending on where you are. Yes, we'll get to the 30s in Dallas, so I guess that's an improvement. 40s for places like New Orleans. But temperatures are still going to be single digits in Des Moines. We've got 20s for Indianapolis. And across the board, really even out towards the East Coast, these numbers are mainly 20 degrees plus below normal for this time of year. Even as we get into tomorrow morning, temperatures still bitter cold, especially in the middle of the country. 1 degree for Wichita tomorrow morning. We start to see some minor improvements for tomorrow. So notice Dallas is in the high 30s. We get Cincinnati into the low 30s. Washington, D.C., 39 degrees. But check out what happens by the time we see Saturday, Sunday, and specifically Monday roll around. That's when we'll see some major improvements. So we kind of start to thaw out as we get through the weekend. Cleveland, you start Saturday with an afternoon temperature of 31 degrees. But notice by Sunday, a big improvement, 36 degrees, woo, 41 degrees by Monday. That's going to feel balmy by all means, especially considering where we've been. Again, Minneapolis, 33 on Saturday. I know that doesn't sound great, near freezing, but you make it to the mid-40s by the time Monday rolls around. Similar story for New York City, upper 30s for your weekend plans on Saturday, but back to those mid-40s in New York by Monday. So we will start to see some milder conditions. I say mild, guys, because these are going to be just numbers that we should be seeing for this time of year. It's still winter. We still got a little ways to go before, of course, we see that major winter thaw. But in the meantime, we're going to need to bundle up for at least the next couple of days.
We're at that point where you can, like, every degree up, you can feel.
Yeah.
You're like, ooh, it's 28.
Winds, yes, and the winds just are brutal. That's made it so much worse.
Yeah, getting up in the morning is just like...
It's been tough. You and me both.
Thanks, Angie.
This morning, the U.S. envoy to Ukraine, his name is Keith Kellogg, is meeting with President Zelenskyy in Kyiv. This face-to-face comes one day after President Trump escalated his feud with the Ukrainian leader.
Yesterday, President Trump ramped up his personal attacks on President Zelenskyy, falsely calling him a dictator without elections on social media. Mr. Zelenskyy was fairly elected back in 2019, but now elections have not been held since then due to martial law that was declared when the war with Russia started. The spat spiraled after Mr. Trump falsely suggested Ukraine was to blame for the war with Russia. President Zelenskyy then hit back, accusing President Trump of being, quote, trapped in a Russian disinformation bubble. The president later ramped up his criticism of Mr. Zelenskyy at an event in Miami last night.
A dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction. I love Ukraine, but Zelenskyy has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died. And you can't bring a war to an end if you don't talk to both sides. You got to talk.
NBC News international correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now. So, Molly, this rift between Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy seems to be rapidly deepening. Many people questioning why all the criticism for Zelenskyy and not necessarily Russian President Putin. How did we get here? How is Kyiv reacting to these latest comments from Mr. Trump?
Right, guys, no criticism for President Putin, who is an actual dictator who's been in charge for about 25 years. But President Trump has never been particularly sympathetic to Ukraine, guys. If we go back a couple of years, even back in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, as you guys rightly fact-checked the president, Trump praised Russia's, quote, genius move to put pressure on Ukraine, and even called President Putin at that time very savvy in a radio interview. So some of this is not totally new. The recent, though, descent into chaos and kind of descent into this war of words, as you guys kind of laid out a little bit, started this week as the U.S. kicked off these peace talks without Ukraine President Saudi Arabia, and President Trump accused Ukraine of starting the war with Russia, and President Zelenskyy had to correct the record. Of course, it was Russia who launched a full-scale invasion into Ukraine in 2022, and Zelenskyy held his own news conference last night, and he says, as you guys mentioned, part of this quote, we have seen this disinformation. We understand that it is coming from Russia, and Trump lives in this disinformation space. Now, as President Trump continues to show this deference to Russia, flipping decades of U.S. policy on its head, you guys, I got to say, many of the headlines here in the UK, across Europe, wondering if this rift may be irreconcilable, and also what it means for the rest of Europe, for Ukraine's western flank going forward.
Molly, we also mentioned that the Trump administration's envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, is meeting with President Zelenskyy today. With this backdrop of tensions between the two leaders, of comments from both of them, what are we expecting from these talks?
Yeah, probably a little bit of awkwardness, but in his nightly update last night, President Zelenskyy attempted to move the conversation forward in some productive direction. He said, together with America and Europe, peace can be more secure, and that is our goal. But most importantly, this goal must be shared by our partners, not just by us. Now, U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg also spoke yesterday about what his goals were while on the ground in Kyiv. Take a quick listen, and I'll talk to him back.
We understand the need for security guarantees. It was very clear to us the importance of sovereignty of this nation and the independence of this nation as well. And we're going to, part of my mission is to sit and listen and say, okay, what are your concerns? Where we ask, we can go back to the United States, talk to President Trump.
Now, Zelenskyy, for his part, said he hoped that Kellogg would walk around Kyiv and ask Ukrainians if they trust their president. Do they trust Putin? Let him ask about Trump, Zelenskyy said, what they think about the statements made by their president. So he's hoping that Kellogg actually gets a feel from the Ukrainian people about what it's like to be 3 years into war.
Molly, you mentioned those initial talks between U.S. and Russian officials in Saudi Arabia earlier this week. We're now getting Russian President Putin's reaction to that. What's he saying?
Right. The Russian president also spoke yesterday and said Ukraine would not be excluded, but the success of these talks would depend on trust between Moscow and Washington, not Moscow and Kyiv. He also said there was no reason to be, quote, hysterical that European and Ukrainian leaders weren't at the table this week. But I got to tell you guys, talking to European leaders, listening to European leaders this week, they feel excluded and very unhappy with how the U.S. is pushing ahead and kind of pre-negotiating these talks with just Russia.
All right. Molly Hunter. Molly, thank you so much.
Thanks, Molly. Well, let's turn to Washington now. The Pentagon is expected to be the next target of the Trump administration's effort to drastically shrink the federal workforce and slash funding. It comes as protests broke out in multiple cities against these mass firings of government employees. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has more.
NBC News has learned Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is considering firing military generals and some of the department's most senior officers as early as this week, according to 2 defense officials and 3 congressional sources. Most of those targeted have been closely associated with former Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who served under former President Biden, and have worked on DEI initiatives or have voiced opinions that Trump allies view as politically out of line with his agenda, the officials said. Late tonight, the Pentagon said Hegseth is looking to cut 8% of next year's defense budget, totaling around $50 billion. It comes as Elon Musk's DOGE employees are now working inside the Pentagon, according to senior officials, eyeing staffing cuts there. Overnight, President Trump, alongside Musk, dismissed concerns about conflicts of interest with Musk's businesses, even though the tech billionaire's companies, like SpaceX, have massive contracts with the federal government.
If there's a conflict, he won't be involved. I mean, I wouldn't want that, and he won't want it.
First, the mass firings, now the fallout. Across the country, growing protests opposed to the president's efforts to rapidly shrink the federal workforce. Jonathan Kamens was fired just days ago from his job overseeing cybersecurity for the VA's website. your firing has the potential to have a direct impact on the benefits American veterans receive, right?
So many veterans rely exclusively on VA.gov for accessing their benefits because it's difficult for them to get out of the house and get to a VA medical center. If VA.gov goes down, then those people can't get to their benefits.
Still, the president and his top lieutenant, both appearing today at a Saudi investment conference in Miami, are defending their reshaping of the federal government.
I think what we're seeing here is the thrashing of the bureaucracy as we try to restore democracy and the will of the people.
Musk also insisted the majority of federal workers are anti-Trump, noting D.C. is largely Democratic. But more than 80% of federal workers are not in D.C., spread throughout the rest of the country. The acting FAA administrator revealing in a letter to staffers today obtained by NBC News, special government employees who work for SpaceX have now visited the FAA's command center and will be going to other FAA sites to engineer solutions. While the administrator says the agency is keeping employees who perform safety-critical functions, its union says some FAA jobs already eliminated supported safety and airport operations.
All right, Peter, thanks so much. Well, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy defended those firings, saying they did not impact air traffic controllers. But the president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists Union, those members serve as support staff to air traffic controllers. He's calling on the administration to stop additional cuts to the FAA's workforce, citing safety concerns. Well, as Trump looks to make these spending cuts at the Pentagon, Senate Majority Leader John Thune is working on a budget resolution that would boost defense spending in the latest budget battle between the House and the Senate.
The plan would also increase border security spending. It aims to give Mr. Trump a policy win, a legislative win, early in his first term. This could put pressure on House Republicans to join the Senate rather than work on a separate budget resolution, which risks taking longer to pass. Mr. Trump is expressing his support for the House version. Writing on Truth Social, the House resolution implements my full America First agenda, everything, not just parts of it.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona. Melanie, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. So tell us more about what is in the Senate's plan and how Republicans in the Senate are reacting to Trump's comments of support for this House plan.
Yeah, good morning, guys. So this Trump endorsement of the House version of this bill was a real curveball for the Senate. I talked to a number of senators who said they were really surprised and caught off guard by those comments. Republicans, of course, they don't want to get ahead of Trump. They don't want to be doing anything that could be seen as disloyal or, sort of in defiance of him. So there were some serious questions yesterday about whether they were still going to proceed with their own version in the Senate. But they huddled with Senator J.D. Vance during a lunch yesterday. And during that meeting, J.D. Vance told senators they are okay at the White House with them proceeding in the Senate with their own plan, but only as a backup in case the House falls short. I want to play for you what John Thune, the Senate GOP leader, told reporters yesterday. Take a listen.
If the House can produce one big, beautiful bill, we're prepared to work with them to get that across the finish line. But we believe that the president also likes optionality.
So the Senate is full steam ahead. They are going to vote on their budget blueprint later today. There will be an opportunity for an unlimited number of amendments, including from Democrats. So that is going to be a long night. We are expecting them to work through it and ultimately pass this potentially in the wee hours of the morning. And it's just to remind you here, what the Senate is trying to do is they are just trying to get a quick win for the president. So their bill only contains money for the border, also some energy and defense money as well. And they were planning on saving the tax piece for later. But over in the House, they're worried with their slim margins. They only have the opportunity for one bite at the apple, so to speak. So they're trying to put everything into one big package. Of course, the question is whether the House actually can pass something. They have been whipping members, taking a temperature check all week. There are some concerns from moderates over potential Medicaid cuts to SNAP, but they are pushing ahead with their plan, putting it on the floor next week, guys.
Yeah, that's what I want to ask you about. I mean, Republicans have such a razor-thin majority in the House. What actually happens next on a resolution like this? As we described, it's a slower, longer process, right?
Yeah, exactly right. The first step is to pass this budget blueprint, as I mentioned. And remember, that is only the first step to unlocking this very complicated process called reconciliation. That is needed because they need that in order to get around the 60 vote threshold in the Senate. So both the Senate and the House have to pass the same budget blueprint. But then the committees have to actually get to writing the policy. And that's where it can get very complicated. As I mentioned, there's concerns about cuts to Medicaid, to food stamps, all of these critical programs that even some Republicans have constituents who rely on. So there is some nervousness, particularly among moderates, some of these Republicans who are competitive races. The leadership has been racing to work and win over these members ahead of their floor vote next week. But it's still very much up in the air whether the House is indeed going to be able to pass this on their own.
Melanie, while we've got you, we also want to ask you about these key Senate confirmation votes on the Hill later today we're expecting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we already saw some committee confirmation hearings this week, including for Lori Chavez-DeRemer. That is Trump's nomination to be the labor secretary. She is someone who actually, though, might need Democratic support to get over the finish line. And that is because she is facing some resistance from Republicans over her past support for labor unions and for organized labor, including some legislation that would have overturned right-to-work laws in Republican states. But during her confirmation hearing, she assured Republican senators that she no longer supports that bill and that she is determined to implement Trump's agenda. So she could be up next in the list of confirmations, and the Senate is quickly working through them on behalf of President Donald Trump.
All right, Melanie, and who's your guest star over your shoulder?
That is my dog, Bodie. He is a TV star. He can't help himself.
Hey, Bodie.
We hope Bodie can get comfortable and finally
really
lay down there.
Checking out all the available spots. Melanie, thank you very much and welcome to the team. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Farmers across the country are feeling the impact of President Trump's executive order freezing some federal funding. Critical government grants that some farmers were counting on are not getting paid out. NBC News correspondent Emily Etna spoke with a farmer in Maine who says he is now worried about the future of his business.
There's about 100 of them out there.
Kevin Levitt hopes these solar panels would help his Maine farm flourish.
The hope here is that these panels will produce enough electricity that the farm needs all year long.
He was only able to move forward with the pricey project because of a federal program that promised to shoulder roughly a third of the cost after completion. But the panels have been up and running for weeks and no sign of the $45,000 he's been counting on from the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Could you have ever imagined finding yourself in this position after taking on that agreement?
No, everything is in writing, everything's signed, you're stressed out, you're on edge. It has a toll on you.
President Trump has signed a flurry of executive orders pausing federal funding for review, including the Inflation Reduction Act, the climate initiative passed during the Biden administration. That has grant money built in for farmers like Levitt to conserve soil, water, and energy.
I can't get any answers.
Coast to coast, farmers who overwhelmingly supported Trump in November are voicing confusion and concern.
I've already done a bunch of the work, already paid for the material, already paid for the labor, so I'm out all that cost.
It's going to reach into every state and every community nationwide. That's how far the reach of the Department of Agriculture is.
A USDA spokesperson says Secretary Rollins is aware farmers have been waiting on payments during this government-wide review and is working to make determinations as quickly as possible, citing plans to share information later this week. Until then,
what do you want people in Washington to know?
Enforce the contract that they gave to us, that they gave to everybody else, and do what it says.
Or else what?
Or else there might not be farms.
Emily Etna, NBC News, West Gardner, Maine.
All right, now let's get to New York, where a federal judge has delayed making a decision on whether to drop the federal corruption case against embattled New York City Mayor Eric Adams.
At a hearing yesterday, Judge Dale Ho questioned a top Trump Justice Department official who ordered federal prosecutors to dismiss the charges last week. That official said that the case against Adams threatened to interfere with national security and immigration enforcement. At least 8 prosecutors have resigned in protest. Adams was indicted in September September on 5 counts, including soliciting illegal foreign campaign donations, bribery, and fraud. Now, at that hearing, Mayor Adams told the judge he has not committed a crime. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos is here to help break it all down. So we should note, the former head of the Manhattan Federal Prosecutor's Office, who also resigned, is basically saying this is a quid pro quo. That's the accusation here. The mayor gets the charges dropped. In return, the Trump administration gets help with their immigration enforcement here. For the judge, what is the judge trying to figure out here? What's the line of questioning? What is it the judge is able to do?
Federal prosecutors can dismiss their own case, but the rule requires leave of court. Now, what does that mean? Historically, it's not supposed to be a rubber stamp, but practically speaking, it is a rubber stamp because what is a judge going to do? But judges have pushed back in the past. A good example is the prosecution of General Michael Flynn during the Trump administration. Flynn, though, had actually pleaded guilty when the Trump administration tried to withdraw the prosecution. It was in a different procedural posture, so in theory, because he'd already pleaded guilty, they could proceed to sentencing. This case has not even gotten to trial yet. So while in theory the judge can put a lot of evidence on the record, and the Flynn case tells us he could appoint a special prosecutor type person to litigate the issue. He could invite amicus briefs from professors or people who have opinions about this. But ultimately, practically speaking, this case is likely going to go away. The judge can put a lot of facts on the record, but it just isn't tenable to force the DOJ to continue with a prosecution that DOJ no longer wants to prosecute.
So let's say it is dismissed. Is there any way for Manhattan or New York State prosecutors to salvage this case against Adams at all?
Yes, in theory, but practically speaking, it's not likely. Not so much because New York couldn't come up with similar crimes. There are bribery and corruption crimes under state law as well as federal law. But the challenge becomes, I think, political, because if the Manhattan DA's office ramps up an investigation and prosecution now, it won't look so great. It will look very political, which is the exact issue in this case, is whether or not this is not only a political prosecution, but a political dismissal.
All right, let's talk about another big headline that came out of yesterday. This involves New York City's congestion pricing. So the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, told New York Governor Kathy Hochul he's terminating the DOT's agreement to allow the program. President Trump then celebrated this news on Truth Social, declaring, quote, congestion pricing is dead, and saying, long live the king. A White House aide then later shared this AI-generated image of Trump appearing as a monarch. That aside, this is a controversial program that New Yorkers have been talking about like crazy over the last several weeks. It involves being charged when you come into the city, entering parts of Manhattan. Governor Kathy Hochul says, we're going to see you in court, Mr. Trump. What happens here? How could this play out?
Yeah, forget Republicans and Democrats. For New Yorkers like us, there is no more divisive issue than this congestion pricing. Some people love it. Some people hate it. What this is not, though, this is not the federal government giving a state government or a municipality a direct order to cease congestion pricing. Then you might run into some supremacy clause issues. You might run into some constitutional issues. You still do run into constitutional issues with this. Don't get me wrong. But this is a little more nuanced. Instead, the federal government is saying the agreement that the prior administration entered into to allow this congestion pricing was no good, and they're going to reevaluate it. And so that's really what's going on. If you look back historically, federal highways are supposed to be free. There are exceptions to that. I can think of 76 in Pennsylvania. But for the most part, federal highways are supposed to be free. And one of the chief complaints of the administration is that this congestion pricing has no free alternative. There's no, you can't drive north to US 80 and drive that toll free if you want to avoid 76. Here, everyone who comes in has to pay the pricing. The federal government says that is not proper. So it's looking at all these different reasons why it should be able to stop congestion pricing.
All right, Danny Savalas, thank you.
This morning, federal authorities are investigating yet another deadly aviation incident. This time it happened at an Arizona airport. At least 2 people were killed in a midair collision between 2 small planes. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has the details.
This was the scene in rural Arizona, charred debris littering this airport outside Tucson after a deadly midair crash.
Small aircraft fully involved in fire.
According to the NTSB, just before 8:30 a.m. local time, 2 small private planes, a Lancer and a Cessna, were flying near the Marana Regional Airport when they collided midair. The FAA says 2 people were on board each aircraft. And while federal investigators say the Cessna landed uneventfully, the Lancer crashed, catching fire. Local officials confirm 2 people are dead. Both planes were flying over what's known as an uncontrolled field that has no air traffic control tower.
Small airplanes go in and out of uncontrolled fields frequently. They depend on radio positions to tell each other where the airplanes are, and also visually to watch out for other airplanes. Similar to driving a car, you look outside to make sure you don't hit anything.
This has been a troubling year for American aviation. Last month, 67 people were killed when an American Airlines jet and a military chopper collided over Washington, D.C. Then earlier this week, a Delta airliner flipped over as it landed at Toronto Pearson International Airport on Monday. At least 18 people were injured. Officials say efforts have begun to remove the plane from the runway, which should improve traffic delays at one of North America's busiest airports. Jesse Kirsch, NBC News.
Well, in Missouri, prosecutors say a man has died just days after pleading guilty to shooting a black teenager who mistakenly rang his doorbell. 86-year-old Andrew Lester was awaiting sentencing after accepting a plea deal on Friday for shooting Ralph Yarl in the head back in 2023. You might remember that shooting sparked nationwide protests and demands for Lester's arrest. Lester had pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree assault and faced up to 7 years in jail. Prosecutors did not say how he died. Yarl's family telling NBC that Lester never apologized and delayed his trial to avoid taking accountability.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, the bird flu continues to have an impact across the U.S. We're going to take you inside a lab where scientists are working to better understand this serious strain.
But up next, a nation mourns as Hamas has returned the bodies of 4 hostages back to Israel. The latest on the ceasefire. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Tourists are flocking to Sicily to get a peek at the tallest volcano in Europe, which has been erupting all week. Mount Etna has been spewing tons of lava and volcanic gases. It's even led to earthquakes in the area. The phenomenon is attracting plenty of risk-seeking tourists, prompting authorities to issue safety warnings. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley has more.
Terrifying and beautiful at the same time. That is Italy's Mount Etna, and people can't seem to stay away from the allure of the bright orange lava spewing from the world's most active volcano in Sicily. The tourists getting authorities red hot while they coordinate rescues. The tallest volcano in Europe has been erupting for centuries, starting up again in February, rippling fiery red lava across the mountain's crater. Drone footage shows cascading plumes of volcanic gas rising. Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology is tracking lava as high as 300 meters above sea level. The town below attracting thousands of tourists to get a view of the spectacular sight. But the head of Sicily's Regional Protection Agency telling CNN the influx of people is becoming a safety risk, saying tourists are blocking rescue workers and ambulances from reaching the mountain and hiking up the narrow, snowy roads without a guide. He said this week 8 people were rescued after getting lost for several hours attempting to hike the mountain without any help. We reached out to the department for comment, but haven't heard back. Thousands of miles away, a massive eruption from Hawaii's second-largest volcano has also been luring visitors. People flocking to the site just to get a glimpse of the fountaining lava, erupting on and off since late December. For now, the volcano doesn't seem to be posing a safety risk for the visitors there. But at the snow-capped Bocca Nuova crater back in Italy, a few dozen flights had to be diverted due to the eruptions. Flights have since resumed. Skiers there getting dangerously close to the lava, defying the locals' calls to stay away. Quite a way to heat up the cold weather sport. Matt Bradley, NBC News.
Wow, amazing images there. Well, now for other international headlines, let's start with the latest from the Middle East.
NBC News international correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us from London with more world headlines. Megan, good morning.
Guys, good morning to you. That's right. We start in the Middle East, where Hamas released the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages who were first turned over to the Red Cross in Gaza. Hamas says they returned the remains of 3 members of the Bibas family, Kafir and Ariel, who were the 2 youngest held in captivity. They were just 8 months and 4 years old when they were taken. The body of their mother, Shiri, also along with 84-year-old Oded Lifshitz, were also returned. The Israeli government says the bodies will undergo forensic testing to confirm their identities. And some encouraging news this morning for Pope Francis. The Holy See press office says the pontiff has had a restful night. He got out of bed and ate his breakfast in an armchair. The Vatican sources we've been speaking to say he's also been able to continue some of his work activities. The Pope has now spent 6 nights in Rome's Gemelli Hospital, where he's being treated for double pneumonia. Doctors reported last night that the Pope is in stable condition and showing slight signs of improvement. And in India, the country's ruling Hindu Nationalist Party just named a woman as their top official in the capital, New Delhi. This 50-year-old woman, her name is Rika Gupta. She is now the chief minister. She has become the 4th woman in this position in New Delhi, but keep in mind, it's still very rare for women to be in these top positions. So good for her. All right, guys, back to you.
Thank you so much. Coming up, we are continuing to see the impact that the bird flu is having at farms and on our wallets.
When we come back, we're going to introduce you to scientists who are looking for answers, trying to better understand the strain. You're watching Morning News Now.
Welcome back. A destructive strain of bird flu has been making its way through wildlife in the U.S. since 2022, sparking outbreaks in poultry and also some human cases. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson has more on how scientists are working urgently to understand and contain it.
Even on a frigid winter morning, you can see why the Finger Lakes are central New York's environmental heart and not immune to the bird flu. Here on Cayuga Lake, masked and gloved, Cornell University's Dr. Jenny Bloodgood tests for bird flu.
And those swabs are going to tell us if they have a current avian influenza. And just swirl it around a few more times. That's great. Yep.
I got to help with the swabbing. Back in Bloodgood's lab, initial tests show 3 of the 4 ducks swabbed have the highly contagious virus.
We have found many different positive species, ranging from waterfowl to raptors like eagles and hawks.
In fact, since the outbreak began in 2022, this strain of the virus has been detected in wild birds in all 50 states. There are reports of birds falling out of the sky and washing up on beaches.
What mammals have tested positive for bird flu?
In New York State, it's primarily been red fox. We've seen a skunk, an opossum, a bobcat.
Does that suggest that the flu is mutating?
It could, yes.
A mutation caused this massive die-off of elephant seals on the Argentinian coast in 2023.
The beaches are still covered with bones.
UC Davis scientist Dr. Marcella Uhart says in just weeks, the mutated virus spread, killing 17,000 of these top ocean predators. She estimates it will take the species 10 to 70 years to recover.
So the bird flu has the potential to really upset an ecosystem.
Absolutely, because the bird flu impact is also adding to climate change and El Nino events and other dramatic changes in the ocean ecosystems.
Increasingly deadly to wildlife, threatening ecosystems here and around the world. Ann Thompson, NBC News, Ithaca, New York.
Coming up, the Trump administration's idling of one agency is impacting some lawsuits.
Up next, the consumers involved in a lawsuit against Capital One Bank who are now left in limbo. You are watching Morning News Now.
Welcome back. The agency responsible for protecting consumers is now in the crosshairs of Elon Musk and his efforts to cut costs across the federal government. Now, among the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's many projects, about a month ago, it sued Capital One Bank, accusing the company of cheating consumers out of more than $2 billion, something the bank denies. But now that work at the agency is effectively frozen. So what happens to lawsuits like this one? NBC's Brian Chung takes a closer look.
The government's watchdog for consumers now under watch from DOGE. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, was set up after the Great Recession to police financial firms for consumer harm. Over the years, taking payday lenders to court and drafting new rules to curb excessive credit card and banking fees. But the agency is now the subject of Elon Musk and President Donald Trump's efforts to slash costs in government, as the administration accuses the CFPB of excessively regulating the industry, a case of, quote, government overreach. Musk recently tweeting RIP as the administration tapped 2025 project co-author Russell Vought, acting director, and began plans to lay off CFPB employees en masse. The union representing Bureau employees brought a lawsuit, leading a judge to block the mass firings for now. But in the meantime, the agency's functions are essentially frozen. Vought told staff via an email obtained by NBC News, quote, "Please do not perform any work tasks." Law professor Chris Peterson worked at the CFPB in the Obama administration and says consumers may not have anywhere to go while the CFPB is on ice.
If this agency stops to do its work, all across the country, my family, your family, our grandmothers, our brothers, our sisters are going to be less safe from scams and billing errors and financial traps.
The move's drawing the ire of Democrats, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, the architect of the agency.
They have said, just stand by and let the Wall Street boys take your money.
The agency says it's returned $21 billion to scammed Americans since 2011.
Consumers didn't have any place to really file complaints. They didn't have anywhere to go when the biggest banks in America was ripping them off.
Among the Bureau's most notable actions, getting the three major credit reporting bureaus to wipe medical collections under $500, pushing banks to reduce overdraft fees, and settling with Wells Fargo for $3.7 billion for allegedly wrongly repossessing cars and improperly charging customers fees on mortgages. Wells Fargo admitted to unacceptable practices.
The basic mission of holding Wall Street banks accountable is very popular.
One of the agency's latest projects, taking on Capital One, alleging the bank cheated savers out of more than $2 billion in interest.
You and your money deserve better.
Spurring a lawsuit after consumers say Capital One kept them in the dark about a high-yield savings account that would have earned them over 4%, as they stayed in accounts yielding just 0.3.
The interest rate on the website was something that they were not getting. And they ultimately figured that out and called to complain to Capital One. And they were outraged. Capital One turned to a strategy of blaming the victim, saying, you should have figured it out sooner.
Chet Waldman is one of the attorneys who first brought the case to the courts with an independent law firm. The CFPB then jumped in with its federal enforcement firepower.
The CFPB became aware of our lawsuit and at some point began to investigate.
Capital One telling CNBC, we strongly disagree with their claims and will vigorously defend ourselves in court. The CFPB did not respond to NBC News' request for comment about the staff layoffs or the status of suits like the one against Capital One. But former staffers say the future of the agency remains up in the air.
So right now, the most important federal watchdog has been locked up and isn't doing its work.
All right, thanks to Brian Chung for that report.
Well, in other money news, President Trump says he is considering a DOGE dividend check for Americans.
NBC's Savannah now joins us to explain what that is and other big financial headlines. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Savannah. Good morning to you. Yeah, President Trump says he likes the idea of giving some of the savings created by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency back to Americans in the form of a dividend check. Now, it's a plan suggested to and floated by Musk earlier this week, and the president says the administration is considering a concept in which 20% of savings produced by DOGE's cost-cutting efforts goes to Americans and 20% goes to paying down the national debt. Budget experts are skeptical of this idea. The government sent out 2 stimulus checks signed by President Trump during the pandemic in 2020. Delta Airlines is offering the passengers who were on the Toronto-bound flight that crashed and flipped over earlier this week $30,000 each. If the 76 passengers accept the offer, it would cost the airline just over $2 million. A Delta spokesperson says the offer has no strings attached and does not affect the passengers' rights. And Tesla drivers are the worst drivers in America. A new study from LendingTree finds Tesla has the highest rate of crashes, speeding tickets, and DUIs. Tesla drivers rank as the worst in 9 different states. Ram is the second worst, followed by Subaru. Now, the best drivers in the country include brands that are no longer in business, such as Mercury and Pontiac. Now, I feel personally attacked. I drive a Tesla, and I'm not a bad driver.
Okay, well, good. We believe that. I drove a Tesla once, and that I didn't get into an accident was a minor miracle because I had no idea what I was doing at all.
It really is crazy, like the way that they kind of brake on their own and stuff.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
How they brake and how they take and how they accelerate.
Yeah. All right, Savannah, you'll give us lessons.
Yeah.
All right.
I will. Don't worry. I got you guys. Yeah.
All right. Well, now to the quick work of two individuals who actually, of two heroes that saved the life of a woman in Arizona. She was trapped in a burning truck following a 7-car crash on a major highway on Tuesday. Body cam footage shows the moment a police officer broke through the windshield to get her out and away from the car. William Pitts from our Phoenix affiliate 12 News has the story.
Some people back away from danger. Others, like Officer Brian Larison, run into it.
Here, get out of the way, get out of the way.
That truck had been hit by a cement mixer, rolled and caught on fire. Larison parked his bike and ran towards it.
I saw there was a female still trapped inside in the driver's seat, and the back of that truck was just engulfed. And
it was only a few hours ago. Just because he was brave doesn't mean it was easy.
I'm not going to let her burn up. I know. I was like, I hit it 3 times. I was like, it seemed like it took forever to try to get this window to break. And my thought was, she's not dying.
Larison finally broke the window.
Get out.
And as he did, he spotted someone else running into the fire.
For some reason, I looked out a corner of my eye, and there's this off-duty fireman, and he's got all his fire retardant gear on. And I'm like, what?
Get her out. Anybody else in there? Anybody else in there? Get back from the truck. Get back.
Yeah, we're good. I'm glad you're here, brother.
Well, I was just going
right here.
I dialed her husband. I asked for his name, spoke to him, and I gave the phone to her, let her talk to her husband just to reassure him and her. Everything's good.
705, we got the passenger out of the truck. He's completely engulfed.
It was over in minutes, without hesitation. It's not just that Larison's a cop. He also served in the military. He knows what's at stake.
I don't matter. They do. That's how I look at it. It's just, I signed up for this. I was a Marine before I became a cop. I've been doing it since I was 18 years old. Contract says payable with my life if necessary. That's what we do.
Payable with his life. But not today. Not for him or the woman he saved.
Okay, relax. We got you.
She clung to me on the side of the road, and I just held her. And I just told her I had her. So I just told her I had her, and she's okay, and she's safe.
We got you.
Thanks to William Pitts for that report. Just amazing. Coming up, a mother and son are teaming up on the basketball court and making history.
When we come back, how they're aiming for glory and the pre-match ritual they never miss. Stay with us.
Finally, this hour, we want to introduce you to a mother and son duo who are making history on the court.
Their love of basketball and each other is taking one high school team on a tournament run. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has their story.
At home, Linda Martindale is mom.
Is this your pop culture class?
Yeah. But on the court,
it's ridiculous. Put a body on him.
She's coach, guiding the high-flying Lincoln Sudbury Warriors outside Boston.
How rare is it for you to see another woman coach in men's high school basketball?
I won't see it.
Set it up.
And for their 17-year-old senior shooting guard, Nolan, she basically wears 2 hats.
When you're out here, do you call her mom or coach?
Actually depends. Like if I'm on the court, coach, 100%. After the game, probably call her mom, mama.
The state's athletic association says it believes they're the first mother-son duo in their tournament's history.
We have rules. We don't sit down and discuss the game right after. We give it some time. But I love to talk about the game. And so when I get home, he's the perfect audience.
And the perfect partner for a pregame ritual, a hug between mother and son before every single game.
It's a beautiful way to just connect for 1 second. I know who I am. I'm your mother.
Linda played college ball at Arizona and coached all 4 of her children over nearly a quarter century. But Nolan is the baby. Just don't think she's taking it easy on him.
She's definitely the hardest on him, as you could expect. She's picking on one of our best players, so that happens to be her son as well.
How proud are you of your son and of this team?
Oh my gosh, beyond. We make them work really hard and they rise up and they do it.
The Warriors just held senior night, and Linda sported her son's 33 jersey. While the team doesn't know how their upcoming postseason will end, one thing is for certain. Everybody knows how their last game together will start.
It'll be just me and her for a second. Love you, Mom. Let's do this.
Sam Brock, NBC News, Sudbury, Massachusetts.
It's like a really good hug, too. They're like, it's like a real embrace you feel, not like some teen kid who's like pushing their mom away or anything like that.
My dad coached my few sporting forays, which was so sweet.
And you won many championships,
Oh, yeah,
right?
you know, I was the star. Not. He'll be watching and laughing for sure. But it's so sweet to see a mom. It's just, it really is something unique. It's cool.
Love to see that. That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning, and thanks for joining us this Thursday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, a teeth-chattering cold snap putting millions of Americans from Colorado to the Carolinas on ice, with record-breaking low temperatures expected. Mother Nature slamming folks in places like Virginia with the biggest snowstorm that state has seen in years. It's making for some pretty treacherous travel out there on the roads, and the danger is not over yet. Our Angie Lastman is tracking it all as we head into the weekend. An explosive war of words between President Trump and Ukraine's President Zelenskyy that's rewriting history overseas. Mr. Trump taking to Truth Social to blast America's longtime ally, calling him a dictator as the White House looks to reset relations with Russia. The reactions now pouring in from Capitol Hill and beyond. Also this morning, a potential game changer in the fight against one of the deadliest forms of cancer. Could simple, personalized vaccines of the same type developed to fight COVID hold the key to beating back pancreatic cancer? And grab your passports, because later in the hour, we're taking you set jetting. We're diving into the tourism boom that follows the exotic locales of some of TV's hottest shows. Basically, White Lotus without the murder.
Exactly. And those hotels, apparently, it's just ridiculous in price and everything. Everybody wants to go there.
It works. You got to just get a show written about you. All right, let's start this hour with the Arctic blast that's stretching from the Rocky Mountains down to the Gulf Coast this morning. Tens of millions of Americans are waking up to extreme cold alerts with possible sub-zero wind chills as far south as Arkansas and Texas.
It is all part of the latest winter storm system that triggered a dangerous mix of rain, snow, and ice, and dozens of new record low temperatures across the Midwest, the Central Plains, and the Mid-Atlantic. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson, she is out there braving the elements for us. She's live in Dallas, where the wind chill dropped to 2 degrees earlier this morning. Hi, Priscilla. Good morning.
Yeah, Savannah, Joe, good morning. And a frigid one here in Dallas. Take a look at this fountain. As you can see, the water literally frozen mid-air because of how cold it is here. The wind chill right now is at about 4 degrees, so we've warmed up just a little bit this morning. But this is the type of weather that folks are experiencing across the country today. This morning, snow, ice, and freezing temperatures, as 95 million people are under cold weather alerts from the plains to the southeast. The East Coast battered with snow and ice. Southeastern Virginia facing one of their biggest snowstorms in years, with over 12 inches piling up in some areas, making for treacherous travel. This car spinning out in Virginia Beach on slick, snowy roads. 2 people in Suffolk, Virginia, had to be rescued from freezing waters after a crash left their car partially submerged. That Arctic blast also sweeping through the Lone Star State.
It's incredibly cold, but I'm very fortunate that I have my space heater in here to keep me warm.
Cayman Edwards, who manages this food truck, spending the day battling frozen pipes.
We do have a lot of people who love our coffee. Like, makes me sad to tell my regulars, I'm sorry I can't make your coffee.
No coffee today, unfortunately. Meanwhile, in eastern Kentucky, heavy snow also causing multiple accidents on the interstate in Lexington. An area still recovering from this week's deadly flooding.
We're still dealing with flooding. We've had a snowstorm on top of that. Now we're going to deal with frigid temperatures. But, folks, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
And guys, just look at that massive chunk of ice, those massive icicles. Certainly not something that we are used to seeing here in Dallas. And I will say a glimmer of hope for folks like me who prefer the warmer weather. The sun is at least going to be out today. So it'll be cold, but we're going to get a little bit of sunshine.
Ooh, Priscilla, thank you very much. Please go get warm.
And while you try to stay warm, we're going to catch up with our meteorologist, Angie Lastman.
Yeah, she's been busy. She's tracking all these wild winter headlines for us. Hey, Angie, good morning.
You know what? I appreciate Priscilla looking
on the bright side of things, literally and figuratively. Guys, good morning to you. We, of course, still have a lot to talk about weather-wise. We've got some winter alerts in place, and we've also got that cold air that Priscilla just mentioned. So we'll get to that here in a moment. But let's start with that little bit of snow that's still kind of lingering. The system has moved offshore. That's long gone. But notice what's left over. We've got some of these snow showers happening across the Appalachians, the Mid-Atlantic, as well as the Great Lakes. And that's because we've got those kind of strong cold winds coming off the Great Lakes. So no surprise, those heaviest snowfall totals by the time we get through today, they're going to be downwind of the lakes. So that's what you can expect in places like Buffalo. I think the highest amounts, maybe 5 inches. We can still see a couple of spots dealing with these snow showers, though, between now and then. But again, highest elevations of the Appalachians, places like Erie and close to Syracuse will pick up some additional snowfall between now and tonight. Big picture look of those cold temperatures. Boy, they are widespread, to say the least. From top to bottom of the country and out towards the southeast, almost 100 million people included in these alerts this morning. And they are just bitter cold, especially if you look into portions of the northern plains and even central plains. -6 for Kansas City, feeling like 19 below. We've got 28 below across parts of the northern plains. Even Evansville, Indiana, below 0. We've got Dallas looking at a wind chill value right now of -5. How about this afternoon? Well, not a whole lot of warmth in place. Honestly, anywhere east of the Rockies. We've got teens for Wichita, 30s for Dallas. A lot of folks are going to be running 20 to even 30 degrees below normal for these daytime highs. Gets worse once again as we get into the overnight hours and into early tomorrow morning. Check out these lows for your Friday morning, kicking off the last day of your work week. Just 1 degree in Wichita, but feeling like -7. We've got sub-zero feels like temperatures in St. Louis as well tomorrow morning. Needing to bundle up for sure for my friends in Florida that are going to wake up to 28 degrees, but feeling like 20 in Tallahassee. We've got teens for Wilmington, rather, and we see a little bit of an improvement into the afternoon hours. So upper 30s for Dallas, we'll take it. Birmingham into the low 40s. We've got Washington, D.C. into the upper 30s, guys. But by the time we wrap up the weekend, better conditions on the way. And by better, I mean 40s and 50s.
Yeah, but it's the weekend.
How do Floridians feel about
No,
this?
not good. As somebody who lived in Florida for 7 years, the Uggs are out and the parkas are on for temperatures that, in the north would be shorts and T-shirt kind of thing. No shade to our Floridians.
No, definitely not. I understand. Thanks, Angie.
Got it.
Well, a rift between President Trump and Ukraine's President Zelenskyy is deepening this morning after Mr. Trump falsely called his Ukrainian counterpart a, quote, dictator without elections. The attack comes after Mr. Zelenskyy accused the U.S. president of being trapped in a Russian disinformation bubble. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has more on the escalating spat as the U.S.'s envoy for Ukraine holds talks with President Zelenskyy in Kyiv.
For Ukraine, this is far more than just a war of words. Ukraine depends on the United States for support to defend against Russian attacks that are destroying cities across this country. This is the city of Kharkiv, and it is frequently targeted by Russian attacks. In fact, 2 Ukrainian civilians were killed not far from here overnight, according to local officials. President Trump said that he trusts Russia to negotiate an end of this war in good faith. Ukrainians are not convinced. President Trump is escalating his attacks on President Zelenskyy, describing the Ukrainian president as a dictator who's been conning the U.S. out of billions in aid.
The only thing he was really good at was playing Joe Biden like a fiddle.
Trump said he's negotiating to end the war with Russia, adding this ominous threat.
A dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left.
President Trump lashed out after President Zelenskyy accused him of parroting Russian disinformation. In particular, Trump's false claim that Ukraine started the war 3 years ago, even though it was Russia that invaded. A senior Ukrainian official tells NBC News relations soured after Zelenskyy refused to sign a document presented by a Trump official promising to give the United States 50% of Ukraine's rare earth mineral rights. President Putin is clearly pleased by the rift between his enemy and its most powerful backer, complimenting President Trump, saying he's ready for a summit and it will be a pleasure to meet Donald. In Washington, some pushback, including from Republicans.
Make no mistake about it, that invasion was the responsibility of one human being on the face of this planet. It was Vladimir Putin.
In the eastern city of Kharkiv, Ukrainian civilians feel increasingly abandoned by the United States. At a school this morning previously supported by USAID, and now without that funding, children learn underground out of reach from Russian bombs and missiles. Ludmila Ivanova is a math teacher.
What do you make about the things that President Trump is saying and doing about Ukraine?
It is very sad because we feel we have lost a partner and a friend, she said. We hope that soon President Trump will change his position. Today, President Trump's envoy, retired General Keith Kellogg, is in Ukraine meeting with President Zelenskyy.
All right, Richard, thank you very much.
The Pentagon is expected to be the next target of President Trump's efforts to try and drastically shrink the federal workforce. His new Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, is planning roughly $50 billion in cuts that could include the firing of some top generals as soon as this week. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Hake joins us with more. Garrett, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. The White House suffered another legal setback overnight on its immigration agenda, but in the president's efforts to slash federal spending and employment, things are full steam ahead. Now it's the Pentagon in the cost-cutting crosshairs of the Department of Government Efficiency as the impact of all those federal firings continues to be felt around the country.
A legal showdown looming over a key part of President Trump's agenda. Overnight, an appeals court ruling that his executive order limiting birthright citizenship will remain blocked. Another court had ruled the order violates the Constitution, which extends American citizenship to anyone born on U.S. soil.
We'll end up winning that court in the Supreme Court.
But the president is moving forward on another priority, reshaping the federal government, with new changes potentially reaching the nation's military and Social Security. As he requires that more federal departments line up with his agenda, Trump also posting, quote, "Long live the king" yesterday, while aiming to get rid of New York City's congestion pricing. The White House following up with doctored images. New York's governor writing, quote, "We're a nation of laws, not ruled by a king." As behind the scenes, the major material changes from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency continue.
You take a look at DOGE and you see what's happening.
This morning, the Pentagon is in the cost-cutting crosshairs of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, with DOGE staffers now inside the Defense Department, according to senior officials. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth ordering the Pentagon brass to find a way to cut the defense budget by roughly $50 billion, according to the Defense Department, while 5 sources tell NBC News some generals and other high-ranking officers may also be on the chopping block. Many of those closely associated with former Biden Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, or who've worked on programs seen as politically out of line with the Trump agenda. Yesterday, the president also floating a new use for any DOGE-related savings.
We're thinking about giving 20% back to the American citizens and 20% down to pay back debt.
But any such spending would require congressional action, and the president did not say where the remaining money would go.
We're not some deep state that has ulterior motives. I want to go to work. I want to help veterans.
In December, Marine veteran Andrew Lennox started a job he considered a calling at the VA hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan, working as an administrative officer. He says his firing by email late last week surprised even his direct supervisors.
What does that tell you about the reasoning behind it?
It was arbitrary and it wasn't thought out.
Garrett, speaking of budget cuts, what more can you tell us about the potential impact now to Medicaid?
Yeah, Joe, this has been kind of a mess. Congress has been slowly putting together this big tax and border policy bill that the president demanded. House Republicans have been eyeing the $880 billion Medicaid safety net program as something they could potentially reform or cut steeply to pay for other priorities. But the president just said in this Fox News interview from the other day that Medicaid will join Medicare and Social Security as programs the spending bill won't touch. All of this creates a huge math problem for Republicans and for the president, who've now promised both huge savings in this bill to pay for tax cuts and not to touch 3 of the most expensive things that the federal government does. It's not at all clear to me today how they solve that problem, Joe.
All right, Garrett, thank you.
Well, now let's get to yesterday's fatal mid-air plane collision in Arizona. It involved 2 small single-engine planes at an airport north of Tucson. Now, this is just the latest aviation incident, once again putting air travel safety in the spotlight, just after the Trump administration fired hundreds of FAA employees. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz joins us with the latest on this and what you should know about the state of air travel, as we all have a lot of questions. Liz, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. Yeah, officials say 2 people have died in that crash in Arizona. It's unclear if there were any other injuries, but it does come after 5 high-profile airline crashes in just the last 3 weeks. All of these incidents putting renewed scrutiny on both air travel and the FAA.
This is the charred aftermath of yet another aviation accident, this one involving 2 small private airplanes Wednesday morning just outside Tucson.
small aircraft fully involved in the fire.
Officials say a Cessna and a Lance airplane like these, each with 2 people on board, collided midair near a small airport that does not have an air traffic control tower. The NTSB says while the Cessna landed uneventfully, the Lance airplane crashed on the runway and caught fire, killing 2 people. Witnesses nearby capturing a plume of black smoke. It comes just 2 days after the harrowing crash landing in Toronto, forcing an emergency evacuation for all 80 people on board. Before that, the fatal air ambulance crash in Philadelphia and the devastating mid-air collision of an Army Black Hawk and an American Airlines plane, which killed all 67 people involved. The family of one of the victims now taking legal action, seeking $250 million from both the Army and FAA for alleged wrongdoing. Neither agency commented on the filing. All these incidents putting a spotlight on the safety of air travel. Over the weekend, the Trump administration fired nearly 300 people from the FAA, according to the union representing employees. Among those terminated, maintenance mechanics, environmental protection specialists, and aviation safety assistants. In a letter to employees, the acting FAA administrator defended the firing, saying the agency has retained employees who perform safety-critical functions.
What kind of impact could those layoffs have?
We have an aviation system that is not new. It's an older system, and it needs a lot of maintenance. So I'm more concerned about the flights being reduced because of this than I am the safety.
Now, as investigators arrive in Arizona, this latest crash adding to the growing list of troubling incidents in the air.
Now, Savannah, we should point out that it's not uncommon for small airports to have what the FAA calls an uncontrolled field, meaning there's no air traffic control tower, and it's up to the pilots to announce their positions and maintain safe distances. The NTSB is expected to have people on scene there today to gather flight track data and communications from both planes to try to better understand what happened. Savannah.
All right, Liz, thank you so much.
In Idaho, a new decision from a judge could have a major impact on the quadruple murder case against Brian Kohberger. It's a big setback for his defense team in their efforts to try and keep critical evidence out of the trial. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has more.
Hey there, good morning. After months of this case seeming to drag on with little movement, it is now moving at hyper speed as the trial date approaches closer, with the judge handing down a series of decisions that will have a huge impact on what the jury ultimately hears.
This morning, a major setback for Brian Kohberger's defense. Multiple new rulings from the judge set to oversee this quadruple murder trial, knocking down all of the defense team's efforts to get key evidence tossed out.
This is State v. Kohberger.
Cell phone and email records, surveillance footage, even Kohberger's past Amazon purchases, potentially all now fair game for prosecutors. But most significant of all, the judge refusing to toss out DNA evidence linking Kohberger to the crime scene, including DNA investigators found on the button of a knife sheath left near the bodies of 2 victims, a statistical match to a swab taken from Kohberger's cheek during his arrest in 2022.
Our first point is it was an illegal search.
The judge appearing deeply skeptical of the defense team's arguments to exclude that DNA at a hearing last month.
When there's a DNA match between the DNA and the sheath and Mr. Kohberger, isn't that probable cause every day and twice on Sunday?
Now finding no constitutional violation from investigators initially running the DNA through public ancestry websites to build a list of possible suspects, explaining Kohberger exposed his DNA to the public by leaving it on the sheath, thus forfeiting any reasonable expectation of privacy in the DNA left behind. The judge similarly not persuaded that investigators couldn't sift through the trash outside his parents' home once they zeroed in on him, saying, by throwing away an item of trash containing his DNA, defendant cannot object to the testing of that DNA. These latest rulings a significant boost for prosecutors heading into trial this summer as they seek to try Kohberger for the murders of college students Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Madison Mogen. The judge also throwing cold water on the defense team's claim that law enforcement misrepresented the account of a surviving roommate, finding her statements to police remarkably consistent, but if not, then fodder for cross-examination.
The Gonçalves family releasing a statement after the judge's ruling yesterday, writing in part, quote, "It is always a double-edged sword waiting. You want the right decisions to be made, but you also want them to be made quickly," adding, "In the big picture of life, justice is just moments away." Back to you.
All right, Laura, thank you.
We've got much more to come on this hour, including the latest from the Vatican on the health of Pope Francis.
First, though, after the break, a day of mourning in Israel. The bodies of 4 hostages taken by Hamas, including a mother and her 2 young sons, returning home. You're watching Morning News Now.
Welcome back. A solemn scene out of the Middle East this morning as the bodies of 4 hostages taken captive by Hamas on October 7th were returned to Israel.
A convoy of vehicles carried the coffins from Gaza through southern Israel as Israelis stood by in mourning. Among the victims, a mother and her 2 young sons. Those kids were just 9 months old and 4 years old when they were kidnapped, making them the youngest hostages.
NBC News correspondent Hala Garani joins us now from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv with the latest on this. Hala, good morning. Tell us more about the handover that took place earlier today.
Well, so it took place this morning. It started with Hamas handing over or presenting to an assembled crowd in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza 4 coffins draped in black material. This is kind of a stage-managed production from the group inside of Gaza, and handing then over to Israeli authorities the coffins that were then ceremoniously taken by the Israeli military, draped in the Israeli flag, and then taken to a forensic institute just outside of Tel Aviv to really be able to ascertain with 100% certainty that these are the bodies, the remains of the Bibas family. That is the mother, Cherie, and her 2 young children, the 4-year-old who turned 5 in captivity, Ariel, and Kafir, who turned 1-year-old in captivity, who was only 8 months when he was taken. And then there was also the body of Oded Lifchitz, who was 83 when he was taken, also killed in captivity.
Hala, this exchange really highlights the plight of these families over the past nearly year and a half now. What happens now that the bodies are back home in Israel?
So, well, as I mentioned, they are going to be forensically analyzed. Eventually, they will be buried. There are still deceased, dead hostages inside of Gaza, about 30 or so, including live hostages that are due to be freed on Saturday, 6 of them. And then, of course, this is, and I'm at Hostages Square, by the way, you just mentioned that, and it's just a more solemn atmosphere today than it is on Saturdays since the signing of that ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, because obviously the country is kind of coming to terms now, this time, with the fact that some of these hostages didn't make it in captivity. Those 3 Bibas family members, the father, Yarden, was released in an exchange a couple of weeks ago, but he's also, as well as the family, going to have to accept the fact that his wife and 2 young children did not make it out alive of the Gaza Strip.
Truly heartbreaking. Hala, this all comes as the last 6 hostages to be released in phase 1 of the deal that's set to happen on Saturday, and then phase 2 talks are in the works. What is the latest there?
Well, 6 hostages, live hostages, are due to come out on Saturday. These will be the 6 last remaining live hostages that are due to be released during phase 1. You mentioned phase 1. This agreement is in 3 stages. The second stage is meant to see the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces and the release of all the remaining hostages, dead and alive. Those are all men, the live ones, and military men. So that is meant to be during stage 2. But there's so many obstacles potentially still ahead. The Israeli side is demanding the complete demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, for example. That's something that Hamas is unlikely to accept. So still so many potential obstacles in the way here. Back to you, Joe and Savannah.
All right, Hala, thank you very much.
Let's get the latest update on the health of Pope Francis.
We have international correspondent Megan Fitzgerald with us from London with that and other headlines this morning. Hey, Megan, good morning.
Guys, good morning to you. We have some encouraging news this morning from Pope Francis. The Holy See press office says the pontiff had a restful night. He got out of bed and ate breakfast in an armchair. Pope Francis is being treated for double pneumonia, but doctors say he's stable and is showing slight improvement. And a mission conducted by the Brits and the Egyptians led to the discovery of an ancient tomb of King Thutmose II, marking the first royal tomb recovered in more than a century. That's according to Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiques. The discovery was made near the city of Luxor. King Thutmose is said to have died in 1479 BC. And lastly, a really sweet story about a conservationist who saw a problem in the Amazon and worked to fix it. Fernanda Arbra noticed that the habitat of species of monkeys called the Grove's titi was too close to the road. These monkeys, by the way, are said to be one of the most endangered primates in the world. So what did she do? She figured out a way to build a bridge for them so that they could cross the road safely. So how did the monkeys get to the other side? They asked Fernanda.
What a great idea. Monkey bars.
They know to use those? That's very interesting.
Monkey bars. I love it. All right, Megan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There is new hope this morning in the fight against one of the deadliest forms of cancer.
After the break, the new generation of vaccines, similar to those that we saw during COVID, that could prove to be a game changer in beating pancreatic cancer. The doctor is in up next.
We're back this morning with some promising news in the fight against pancreatic cancer. It is one of the deadliest cancers out there. Right now, fewer than 13% of people diagnosed with it live more than 5 years after it's detected.
But there is new hope. Personalized mRNA vaccines, similar to the types of vaccines used for COVID-19, they are showing a real potential as a treatment here.
For more, let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, good to have you with us. I know a lot of folks are getting excited about this research on mRNA vaccines for pancreatic cancer. Explain, these are personalized vaccines. Explain how they work and why they're showing so much promise.
Yeah, Joe, Savannah, there is good reason to be excited. So mRNA, if it sounds familiar, it's because we talked a lot about them during COVID vaccines. It's the same technology that's used to develop the majority of COVID vaccines. In this case, 16 patients that underwent an early trial who had already had cancer, pancreatic cancer, removed by surgery, and then had their specific tumor used to tailor a vaccine, in this case, an mRNA vaccine. And much like the COVID vaccine, that vaccine was then injected and helped, like it does in COVID, helped our own body's natural immune system create antibodies, in this case, against any recurrence of pancreatic cancer cell tumors. Half of the patients that got this vaccine, Joe, actually responded with being cancer-free at the end of 5 years, which is nothing short of incredible, but still early results.
Dr. Patel, we mentioned, pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest cancers with very few effective options to treat it. How does this new approach compare to current treatments? What's available? Surgery, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation?
Right. So all of those are currently used for treatment. And as you mentioned, Savannah, this is one of the deadliest cancers. By the end of this year, we project pancreatic cancer to be the second deadliest cancer to lung cancer. And that means that doesn't mean that colon and breast cancer and prostate are not important. It's just that we have more effective treatments against those cancers so people can live and be cancer-free. In this case, we have to use all of the above. In the patients in this trial, it was mostly cancers that you could kind of get at by operating and removing them. Of course, these patients, all, including the vaccine patients, received standard therapy, which, as you mentioned, includes chemotherapy, immunotherapy, and in some cases, radiation therapy. So we kind of do, in medicine, pancreatic cancer has been one of those things, Savannah, that we talk about literally anything and everything possible to attack it because it's so deadly. And unfortunately, when we detect it, it's often too late.
You mentioned this trial. It's small, it's early stage, but the results are encouraging. So talk about what then the next steps are in this research. If things continue to progress, if it's good news, how soon could we see something like this more widespread?
Yeah, so Joe, the good news is that because of these early phase 1 trial results, and as a reminder, we have several phases in clinical trials. Phase 1 is an important hurdle to get through that researchers did get through that. So at Sloan Kettering, they're starting phase 2 trials. That involves over 200 patients with pancreatic cancer. And then that will allow for researchers to be able to delineate, is this just correlation? Did we just happen to see that people who happened to get the vaccine also were cancer-free, but it wasn't really the vaccine, Joe? With phase 2, we'll be able to tell, did this vaccine make a true difference I'm afraid to say it won't help cancer patients right now who are not in the trial, but it will help cancer patients for generations to come. And by the way, this is just one of many mRNA vaccines that we're using for cancers in general. So it's an incredibly promising technology. We'll keep our eye on it.
Yeah, it really is so groundbreaking. All right, Dr. Patel, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, it was only a few weeks ago, if you can believe it, that a pair of giant pandas made their public debut in Washington, D.C. Well, now we're learning more pandas could soon be joining them here in the U.S. NBC News correspondent Ryan Nobles, he is not on Capitol Hill. He is at the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington with more. Ryan, good morning.
Yeah, a little bit of a different assignment for me this morning, Savannah, but that's because there's so much excitement here in Washington, D.C. about the return of these pandas. Bao Li and Qingbao made it back here to D.C. in October. They made their public debut in January, and now Zoo Atlanta in Georgia is teasing out the possibility of even more pandas coming to the United States in the very near future. Big news this morning for fans of these unbearably cute creatures.
Good morning. I cannot handle.
Georgia's Zoo Atlanta announcing Wednesday it's, quote, engaging in dialogue with partners in China on a future giant panda program. The zoo also says it's preparing by looking at ways to expand its panda conservation center, which was home to giant pandas for more than 2 decades, but has sat empty since October when the city's 4 beloved bears returned to China. Long lines of visitors stopping by to say goodbye before they left.
Going to see the pandas.
Now Atlanta is hopeful the playful black and white bears will be back soon. Just last month, Americans celebrating the return of pandas to the nation's capital. 3-year-olds Bao Li and Qingbao getting a fresh start in fresh snow, the Smithsonian National Zoo's newest residents, drawing big crowds for their public debut, even in the cold winter weather.
It feels great to see these pandas again. It's so cool, and I just miss them so much.
In 2023, the National Zoo said goodbye to its previous pandas, Mei Zhong, Tian Tian, and Xiao Qizhi, not knowing when or if giant pandas would ever return. But after a $25 million renovation of its own, a new agreement was reached with China to bring the bears back.
We're ready to have the people here to fall in love with them like we have.
Only 4 U.S. zoos have welcomed pandas with long-term loan agreements from China since so-called panda-plomacy between the two countries started in 1972, after President Richard Nixon's historic visit. These days, just 4 pandas currently live in the U.S., the 2 in D.C. and another pair in San Diego. But no matter where you live, these panda cams are available from both zoos to capture all the cuteness as it happens in real time. Now, it's important to keep in mind that there's no official agreement quite yet between Zoo Atlanta and China, but the fact that they are already announcing this massive expansion of their conservation center is a pretty good indication that they're confident that these pandas will eventually make their way back to Georgia. And Atlanta may not be the only city welcoming pandas in the near future. San Francisco also in talks with China to possibly bring pandas to their zoo as well, although there's no timeline quite yet. The one thing we know for sure, Savannah, is that you just possibly cannot get enough pandas.
I was just
here
going
in
to
the
say,
United
we know how
States,
cute they are. Ryan, thank you so much. Fun one. Coming up, grab your passports because we're going set jetting.
Yeah, a resort in Thailand is experiencing a tourism boom. Eager travelers hoping to relive moments, at least some moments, from the new season of The White Lotus. So what sort of economic impact does that have on some of your favorite shows? What are they having? What impact is that having on destinations around the world? We're going to dig into it next. The world's best video gamers will get to compete on a new world stage. The International Olympic Committee has announced the first ever Olympic Esports Games, which will take place in Saudi Arabia in 2027. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin has more on what it takes to play your way to the top.
Video games are giving Alan Avila a second chance at all of his dreams.
I never would have thought that I would be here from just a simple video game that I grew up playing.
Avila tore his ACL 3 times in college, cutting short his pro soccer career.
I thought my dreams are done.
He started playing EA Sports FIFA, a soccer video game, and streaming it online, becoming one of the top players in the country. He achieved his dream of playing soccer professionally, but virtually getting picked up by 2 esports teams.
I will definitely try to be a part of the Olympic esports.
And now he may even get to be an Olympian. The International Olympic Committee is partnering with the Riyadh-based Esports World Cup Foundation to host the first ever Esports Olympics in Saudi Arabia in 2027.
Esports is still a new sport because it's only a little bit over 20 years old.
Ralph Reichart, CEO of EWCF, says the plan is to set up the tournament like the Olympics, with clubs that now host gamer teams being replaced by nations in 2027.
In esports, nation-based competition, that national pride, hasn't been a primary source of entertainment. And the Olympics are in a unique position to bring that to the industry.
This isn't the first time the Olympics has taken a stab at esports. In 2023, the IOC hosted an esports week in Singapore, but fans on social media were not impressed, since popular games like Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, Valorant, League of Legends, and Dota weren't included.
The Olympics added esports, but they have zero idea what esports are.
The IOC hasn't released the games for the 2027 event yet. And for those of us sticking to the traditional definition of a sport, Avila has a different opinion.
Esports requires a high-level skill and training, just like real sport does. It demands discipline, teamwork, peak performance under pressure. So how can you argue with that?
Dana Griffin, NBC News.
We are getting the latest snapshot of America's labor market this morning.
CNBC's Savannah Hanau joins us with the numbers and some other money headlines. Savannah, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. That is right. We're just getting the latest snapshot on the economy, the job market. So jobless claims. We hear that slightly more Americans applied for jobless benefits last week, but layoffs remain in the same recent healthy range. We got 219,000 versus 215,000 expected. Chipotle plans to hire 20,000 additional workers for its so-called burrito season this spring. The company typically sees a surge in demand between March and May. Last year, Chipotle hired 19,000 additional full and part-time workers. Demand for premium burritos and bowls has been stable, even as value-seeking diners are cutting back spending on fast food amid inflation and wage growth that stalled. And Apple is no longer selling new iPhones with Lightning ports with the launch of the new iPhone SE and the removal of the iPhone 14 and the older SE from its website. Now, all new devices now have a USB-C port. And the change really isn't surprising, as Apple has slowly migrated its products to USB-C from Lightning, which it rolled out more than a decade ago with the iPhone 5. Now, Apple still sells some accessories that need a Lightning port, including the first-generation Apple Pencil.
I have to admit, I've completely lost track of what cord goes where and what to do with it and what they're called.
Same.
And just
The only thing you need to know about Joe and Apple is his phone still has the button, Savannah.
Oh, my God.
Very convenient for Apple Pay. Very
It should be an
convenient
exhibit
for Apple Pay.
in a museum. Okay, Savannah, thank you so much.
That's right. You got it.
This morning, we're taking a look at the economic impact TV shows and movies have on the tourism industry. This is a phenomenon known as set jetting. So fans book vacations in the cities or countries where their favorite shows are set. That term was actually coined back in the early 2000s after the Lord of the Rings trilogy had a lot of people taking trips to New Zealand.
I remember that. It has experienced a new boom since the debut of the hit Max series, The White Lotus.
Oh, yeah.
After the show's first season in 2021, the Hawaiian island of Maui saw close to a 1,000% jump in tourism. And then Sicily, Italy, saw more than a 400% jump following season 2. Well, now with only one episode of season 3 released so far, the resort in Thailand, where the show takes place, already seeing a 40% rise in reservation.
We have travel expert Mark Elwood here with more on this trend. Mark, good morning.
Good morning.
To see you. Are you a White Lotus fan? Let's start
I love
there.
it, but I haven't seen, no spoilers.
Yeah,
I haven't seen this. Okay.
I haven't either,
What are you guys doing? You have to get on it. You can't
we don't
live.
have Max right now. We're trying to figure out who we can maybe borrow it from.
You can't live without White Lotus spoilers, so you better hurry up. Okay, so I'm a huge fan of the show also. I was just telling you I have just visited for drinks the Italy hotel, and it had totally like become its whole personality, right? It was like people there because this is where the White Lotus was. And now we're watching this happen in Thailand. But it means these trips are not cheap, right?
I mean, the point is, we all know that hotel prices are dynamically priced. The more demand, the more expensive they are. So if you set jet to somewhere like the San Domenico Palace in Sicily, now you're going to pay way more than you would have done 10 years ago because so many more people want to do it. Same thing is going to happen in Thailand.
I think it's funny because the White Lotus, while it's beautiful, it's also so dark. Who's watching and be like, I want to go there.
With Emily in Paris, which has also been a huge phenomenon,
Yes.
I get why people are thinking, gosh, I want to have my Emily moment.
Yeah.
But it is kind of crazy that people are thinking, the White Lotus, where the hotels where people die, why don't we book a vacation?
They do such a good job of showcasing how gorgeous they are.
And it's a victory if you live. All right. So it's not just that one. Ted Lasso, that one I get. Succession, I don't know. I mean, that's like boardroom you want to go to? I don't know. And then Lord of the Rings back in the day. I mean, what is it about? Like, you can pick anywhere to go on vacation. What's going on here where people see something on movies or TV and they're like, let's go there?
Well, I think a lot of them, the local authorities are glomming onto it and pushing it. New Zealand promoted New Zealand as the place The Hobbit was filmed. Visit Britain is going to launch a Ted Lasso experience and around that. Emily in Paris, the Paris tourist authorities also promoted that. So I think it is not happening spontaneously. There's a little nubbin that's spontaneous and the rest is a lot of push.
I was just in Paris. It's fun to hear Parisians talk about Emily
What did they say?
Well, it's just like they're not thrilled about it. But I did see one advertisement in a store window for Emily in Paris. So someone clearly likes it.
I also think it's just like you're in the vibe, right? Like you're watching the show and then you're like, okay, I want to just jump into the screen because they obviously are picking these gorgeous places. We were just talking this morning about how and yesterday morning I said this, we're really ready for a vacation. Joe just came back from one, but I haven't been on one.
I'm still in
and it's just like so cold, you know. So if people are starting to think about summer trips, got any good ideas for us?
Well, look, I always say if you want to go in the summer, you want to go to Europe, but I wouldn't go to Sicily. We're all saying, gosh, it gets a bit hot or there's a risk of heat. The safest place to go is in the north. Go to Copenhagen. Go to the Nordics because you're going to get good weather and you could Succession. That's why people are going to Norway because Succession inspired that. There's always a TV show that you can follow somewhere.
I love Copenhagen, by the way.
Absolutely. Great in the summer as well. Gorgeous.
Yeah. Mark Albert, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to see you.
All right, coming up, it was a mega viral sensation that ignited office space spats and fiery family feuds with one simple question. What color is this dress?
Now, 10 years later, we're going behind the scenes with the origin story, so to speak, of this once-in-a-generation meme. Stay with us. Okay, we are back now with a very special dog. This is Relic, who has just been crowned Rescue Dog of the Year by the Pedigree Foundation. The 6-year-old German Shepherd arrived at the East Bay SPCA in Oakland, California, showing signs of major stress after being cared for in a private setup. A family who had recently lost their cat signed up to foster Relic. Look how cute, the wagging tail. They ended up loving him so much they decided to adopt him. He is now thriving and enjoys chasing lizards and guitar jam sessions. The Pedigree Foundation has created a plushie toy of Relic, which is on sale at their online store to raise money to help more puppies in need.
What a great idea. And then he plays the guitar. He's the leader of the jam session.
In-home entertainment. Love that. Rescue, it's the best.
All right, we end this hour with the 10th anniversary of one of the great debates of our time. It's not Lincoln Douglas. It all started with a simple question that divided the internet. What color is this dress? Some of us saw it as blue and black. That's me right now. Others, white and gold. Today, co-host Jenna Bush Hager looks back at what happened next, whether the question was ever settled once and for all.
Throughout modern history, there have been some iconic dresses, from those worn by Princess Diana and J-Lo to Marilyn Monroe. But if you ask someone about the dress, there's a good chance they'll bring up this, a lace dress from British retailer Roman Originals. It was the dress that launched a million tweets, with the internet unable to agree on its color.
Have you heard about the dress seen around the world? What color do you see?
Some people see white and gold.
That is really gold to you?
While others are just as sure they're seeing blue and black.
This is black and blue. How did this craze all begin? With a simple text. Cecilia Bleasdale sent this photo to her bride-to-be daughter, Grace, asking if she thought the $77 blue and black dress was nice for the wedding. Instantly, the two disagreed on the color, with Grace seeing it as white with gold lace. The poorly lit photo made its way online and was eventually noticed by BuzzFeed community manager Kate Holderness.
I turned to my colleagues and just said, hey guys, what color is this dress? Within 5 minutes, there were 20 people behind my desk just screaming at each other. And I figured if we were yelling about it, maybe the rest of the internet would.
Kate's was right. BuzzFeed launched a poll which sparked the biggest debate of the year, with 67% of people saying it was white and gold, and only 33% saying blue and black.
I had dozens of text messages. I couldn't load Twitter because my mentions were crashing my phone, and everyone was yelling at me that I was ruining their lives.
That post was seen by 16 million people in just 6 hours. There were 7.6 million tweets debating the dress. And Roman Originals sold out of the dress in just 34 minutes. Celebrities chimed in too, with Jimmy Fallon arguing it's clearly gold and white, and Taylor Swift writing it's obviously blue and black. Even the Halloween industry cashed in on the viral story. But why did so many people see the blue and black dress as white and gold?
It was the perfect storm to create an optical illusion.
Dr. Sarah Klibanoff told us it's all about how your brain perceives the background lighting of the photo.
If a person saw the dress in a shadow, there's more blue light in a shadow. They immediately think, oh, there's blue light there. I'm going to filter out that blue light, and I'm actually going to see the dress much more white and gold.
And now, even 10 years later, the debate still elicits strong emotions. Do you remember this?
I do, unfortunately.
What colors do you see?
I see gold and white, y'all. Right now I see blue and black.
I've always seen blue and black.
I've always seen white and gold.
I see white and gold.
I see blue and gold.
That wasn't even an option, Davey. The dress will be seared in our collective memory forever. But maybe that's not a bad thing.
Things go viral all the time for really negative reasons. To have something as low stakes and fun as the dress being part of internet history, I think is wonderful.
Our thanks to Jenna for that report. Sadly, the dress from Roman Originals no longer available for sale. So we both mostly saw blue and black,
Yes.
but occasionally during that piece
It
saw
flips.
white and gold. So it is.
It really
incredible
just
right
like,
there.
it's one of those like breaks your brain kind of things. You're like, I don't understand how even I am switching.
I'm grateful the doctor kind of explained it, even though I don't fully understand. But we're kind of splitting here. We've got some white and golds in here. We've got
Yeah.
some blue and blacks in here.
It's a really good point. Like normally something that many people now are talking about on the internet is not.
And now the debate starts again. You
Yeah,
thought it was
let's
over.
do it.
We're going to do
Let's
it all
strike it
over.
up.
All right, that is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us though. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.